History remembers Rome for its grandeur, its aqueducts, its armies, its gods carved from stone and legend. But Rome also remembers its monsters. There are emperors who built empires, and then there are those who inherited them and turned them into something else entirely, something darker, something that even the Roman Senate, hardened men who had witnessed a century of bloodshed and betrayal, struggled to comprehend. His name was Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, but history knows him as Caligula. In just 4 years on the throne of the greatest empire the world had ever seen, he would shatter every boundary of power, sanity, and cruelty that Rome had ever known. He would declare himself a living god. He would humiliate senators, execute generals, and appoint a horse to the Roman consulship. And then, in the cold corridors of his own palace, his own guards would put an end to him. But what truly happened during those 4 years? What turned the beloved heir of Rome into its most feared tyrant? And how much of the legend of Caligula is history? And how much is the revenge of the men he humiliated? The truth, as always, is far more complicated than the myth. To understand Caligula, you must first understand the world he was born into, because it was a world that would have broken almost anyone. Rome, in the early 1st century AD, was the undisputed master of the known world. From the sun-scorched deserts of Egypt to the gray, rain-soaked shores of Britannia, the empire stretched across 3 continents. Its legions were unmatched. Its roads connected a civilization of 50 million people. Its capital, the city of Rome itself, was a monument to human ambition, a roaring, stinking, magnificent city of marble temples, cramped slums, and imperial palaces so vast they consumed entire hills. At the center of all of this sat the emperor, not a king, not a simple ruler, but something closer to a god made flesh. The first emperor, Augustus, had mastered the art of projecting power without appearing to seize it. He called himself the first citizen. He clothed his authority in the language of the old republic. His successor, the cold and paranoid Tiberius, maintained the illusion, though less gracefully. Gaius, Caligula, was born in 12 AD, the third son of the beloved Roman general Germanicus and Agrippina the Elder. His father was the Golden General of Rome, worshipped by the legions, adored by the public. And Gaius grew up in army camps, a small child in a soldier's world. The legions called him Caligula, Little Boot, for the tiny soldier's sandals he wore to amuse the troops. It was a name he reportedly despised, a name that would outlive every monument he ever built. The early years were paradise. Then came the poison. His father, Germanicus, died under suspicious circumstances in 19 AD, possibly poisoned on the orders of Tiberius, who feared his popularity. His mother, Agrippina, was exiled and died in captivity. 2 of his brothers were destroyed, one dead, one imprisoned and left to starve. One by one, the family around young Gaius was dismantled. He survived by becoming invisible. He lived under the roof of Tiberius himself on the island of Capri, a gilded cage with a view of the sea. He smiled, he flattered, he revealed nothing. A writer of the era, Tacitus, would later observe that never had there been a better slave or a worse master. He was 24 years old when Tiberius died in 37 AD. Some whispered he was helped along with a pillow, and the empire fell to Caligula. Rome erupted with joy. The first 7 months of Caligula's reign were almost miraculous. He freed political prisoners. He held lavish games. He recalled exiles. He abolished the treason trials that had made Tiberius's reign a reign of fear. The people of Rome flooded the streets in celebration. Sacrifices were made in his honor. Coins were struck with his face. But then, something changed. In October of 37 AD, just months into his reign, Caligula fell gravely ill. The nature of the illness is unknown. A fever, perhaps. Something neurological. Ancient sources describe convulsions, delirium, and weeks during which death seemed certain. He recovered, and he was not the same. What emerged from that sick room was a ruler of a very different character. Whether the illness damaged his mind, whether the years of trauma finally unraveled, or whether power simply revealed what fear had previously concealed, historians still debate. But the transformation was visible to all of Rome. He began executing those he had previously pardoned. His co-consul for the year, a man named Macro, who had helped place him on the throne, was forced to kill himself. Caligula's own grandmother, the formidable Antonia, died, and some accounts suggest he accelerated that death deliberately. He summoned men to dinner and wept, explaining that he could have them killed at any moment. He laughed. He found this enormously funny. And then came the declarations that would echo across centuries. Caligula declared himself a living god, not merely divinely favored, as Augustus had implied, but literally divine. He reportedly appeared in the Forum dressed as various deities: Jupiter, Mercury, Hercules. He demanded that the statue of Zeus at Olympia, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, be decapitated and replaced with his own likeness. He built a bridge of boats across the Bay of Baiae, 2 miles of ships lashed together, and rode across it on horseback in armor, because an oracle had once told him he had no more chance of becoming emperor than of riding a horse across the bay. He was proving the oracle wrong. He was proving everyone wrong. But proving things to the world requires witnesses, and witnesses require the right kind of terror. There is a story, repeated by the historian Suetonius, embellished no doubt, but rooted in something real, that Caligula once invited senators to dinner and spent the evening whispering to his wife. When asked what he was laughing about, he replied, "It just occurred to me that I could have both your throats cut whenever I choose." He meant it as a joke. Almost. By 39 AD, the Senate of Rome, men of ancient family, enormous wealth, and the last pretense of republican dignity, lived in a state of constant, grinding dread. Caligula had degraded the consulship, the highest office in Rome, by making appointments arbitrarily and briefly. He reportedly made his horse, incitatus, a consul, or threatened to. Ancient sources are inconsistent on whether this actually occurred or was a taunt. A joke designed to demonstrate that the consulship was his to give to whomever, or whatever, he chose. Senators were forced to prostrate themselves before him. Some were made to run beside his chariot. Some were subjected to prolonged and deliberate public humiliation, their families threatened, their wealth confiscated on invented charges. His campaigns were theatrical disasters wrapped in manufactured glory. He marched an army to the shore of the English Channel in 40 AD, and then, in one of history's most baffling military actions, ordered his soldiers to collect seashells. He declared victory over the ocean. He sent those shells to Rome as the spoils of war. But beyond the theater there was blood. The prefect of Egypt was executed. A senator named Ptolemy of Mauritania was killed because he wore a purple cloak that attracted too much admiration. Men disappeared. Accusations multiplied, informers flourished. The machinery of imperial terror, which Caligula had dismantled in his early reign to popular acclaim, now ran at full speed in his name. And then, January 24th, 41 AD. The Palatine Games were underway. Between the morning performance and the afternoon's events, Caligula descended through a covered passageway beneath the imperial box, accompanied by a small retinue. A Praetorian officer named Cassius Chaerea, a man Caligula had repeatedly mocked for an allegedly unmasculine voice, stepped forward. The first blow struck Caligula across the jaw. The second, or perhaps the first, opened his shoulder. He fell. He was still alive. He called out reportedly that he was not yet dead. 23 sword wounds later, he was. He was 28 years old. He had been emperor for 3 years, 10 months and 8 days. The Senate met in emergency session. For one extraordinary moment, Rome's most ancient institutions, the Senate, the consuls, the tribunes, debated something that had not been discussed seriously in nearly a century: the restoration of the Republic. It lasted almost no time at all. The Praetorian Guard, the imperial bodyguard whose power and purpose depended entirely on the existence of an emperor, had already found Claudius, Caligula's uncle, a man dismissed as a bumbling fool by almost everyone who knew him, hiding behind a curtain in the palace. They proclaimed him emperor. The Republic died in that moment, not for the first time, and not for the last. Caligula's wife was killed. His infant daughter was killed, her head dashed against a wall by some accounts. The machinery of damnatio memoriae, the formal erasure of a hated ruler's legacy, was set in motion. His statues were pulled down, his coins were recalled or defaced. But damnatio memoriae cuts both ways. To erase a man, you must first describe him. And in describing Caligula, in cataloging every excess, every cruelty, every absurdity, his enemies ensured his immortality. The primary ancient sources on Caligula, Suetonius, Cassius Dio, and the philosopher Seneca, are uniformly hostile. They were writing under emperors who had every political reason to portray their predecessors as monsters. They wrote with the freedom that comes from speaking ill of the dead to please the living. Modern historians are more cautious. They note that the charges of incest with his sisters, according to Suetonius, are unverifiable, that some of the most lurid stories appear only in the most hostile sources, that Caligula's administrative record, where documents survive, shows a functioning, literate, engaged ruler rather than a babbling madman. But the executions were real, the terror was real, the humiliations were documented by people who lived through them. The empire bled during those 4 years in ways that were entirely his doing. 28 years old, an orphan of empire, raised in the shadow of paranoia and murder, who inherited the most powerful office on earth and was dead before 30. Was he mad? The ancients said yes without hesitation. Some modern scholars suggest epilepsy, hyperthyroidism, encephalitis, the illness of 37 AD as a turning point. Others argue that the concept of madness is too simple an explanation for something more political and more human. A young man who had survived by hiding, who suddenly found himself beyond all consequence, testing the limits of a world that had never given him any. Was he a monster? By any reasonable measure, yes. People died because of his whims. Families were destroyed. Fear was not merely a byproduct of his reign. It appears to have been its point. And yet, the legend of Caligula has always carried something more than horror. There is the absurdity of the seashells, the horse that may or may not have been consul, the bridge of boats, the declaration of godhood. These are not the acts of a calculating tyrant. They are the acts of someone testing the edge of reality itself. Someone who understood, perhaps more clearly than anyone around him, that the entire architecture of Roman power was a fiction, maintained by consent, by fear, and by the willingness of powerful men to pretend that the emperor's authority was something more than the sum of the swords that backed it. Maybe he pushed the fiction until it broke. Maybe that was always how it was going to end. Centuries later, historians are still arguing about what was real and what was slander, still debating whether the sources can be trusted, whether the illness explains the man, whether Rome made Caligula into what he became long before he ever sat upon the throne. One thing is not debated: Rome never forgot him. And in a civilization that measured greatness by the weight of memory, perhaps that is the most unsettling legacy of all. Some men build empires. Caligula simply reminded one that it could all come apart. With a laugh, a seashell, and a very short sword,